Okay. Great. Well, we are back, and I was just mentioning to Jim something. I was thinking I would say it off camera, but I want to say it on camera, which relates to the role play that we just did, Jim. And and it relates to what I was hoping we would get to today, which is exactly where we have gotten to. And to me, it's a bonus that we get another half hour together. It's that what you modeled for me in that role play was a couple things. One is what I call gentle, loving, but assertive interruption, because I found that that skill has transformed my work, because it allows me to direct and move, sometimes cut off or use content in a way that the session doesn't run away from me. And I
Right.
think you sensed that in my, as in this role play, the way I would go from this kind of deeper place to just jumping up to, I don't want this, I don't think this will work, all of that. How you just gently, you kept bringing me back and asking permission. I love how you asked permission, almost like you were saying, hey, just can you walk with me down this path a little further? So that's one thing. And then the other part that really hit me was that you went very slow, and it almost felt like you were like, I remember when I was in my externship, Debbie Shimeka Diaz says that after about 5 years, as soon as you're going slow and you're going slower at times, right? Because we don't always have to go slow, but when you're trying to evoke emotion, and she said, then you want to go 10 times slower, and then sometimes 10 times slower, right? And that's kind of what I heard you kept doing when you had me repeat a couple times in that in enactment. There was almost like a little frustration I felt inside, like I don't, like I really was in. I mean, I could feel it. I was not. I'm sure I was acting, but I could feel it. Then I was thinking, I don't want to have to say that. I already said it, But when you told me to say again, like I really liked holding hands, or I'm scared, or even when you just said the short phrase, it's just like, could you just tell her right now that you're scared? Even though there's a part of me that was resisting it, I think it was resisting the vulnerability, that when I said it,
Yeah.
something happened, something deepened. Could you speak to those two things, the slowness and the interrupting?
Yeah. Well, I often I'll playfully do this in training sometime, but I love to go off of the old Simon and Garfunkel song, and I'll say, slow down, move too fast. Gotta let these emotions last. We're just kicking around in the couple's distress, looking for openings and going deeper. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm reminding my whole limbic system with music, that like, feeling connected, trying to connect. I want to understand you and slow down. And I actually thought, kind of at some points, thought, well, I'm going a little too fast here, but we're trying to do a role play, so and I've got time limits, so it's nice to hear it. It felt slow. I absolutely agree with Debbie. I really value her work, and I know when I've been helping out at things like Core Skills, I would come sometimes and say, I like everything you just said. It's so powerful what you just said to this client in this role play. I'd like you to do it at half speed. Just say it very slowly and then see what happens inside you as therapist.
Yeah.
Because when I slow myself down, I can, I'm starting to enter into your experience more. The more, and then more I'm repeating. So you'll see this with Sue. Sue's in the conversation. You go back and watch the old Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, Carl Rogers. Fred Rogers, my favorite humanist of this 20th century, and Carl's my second. But in Carl's transcripts, he talks about the empathic therapist is actively involved in the conversation because I want to reflect back these powerful things you're saying. I'm working on behalf of your emotional bond. You're sitting in front of me. And part of what I was doing was listening for what hints at vulnerability, what hints at like motivation and intention, what part of this person sitting in front of me is starting to, like, the heart is sneaking in phrases. I think of it sometimes. I think with avoiders and withdrawers and people, the heart's like, yeah, yeah, just go ahead, tell them all the frustrations and stuff, and just mention the fact that you can never get it right with her.
Yeah.
And if he's paying attention, he'll say, never get it right with her. That's interesting. Yeah, and go ahead. Frustration, frustration, frustration. I had a dream. Frustration, frustration. I was talking to my friend,
Yeah,
and
you
I'm listening for those heart cues and paying attention to those. So that's a lot of what I reflected back was the other part, narrative therapist. If we're doing emotional narrative therapy, I'm listening for the non-dominant part of the story at an emotional level that's going to be more, it's going to have more oomph to explore.
yeah.
And what I tried to politely say to you too was, I have this in my head. People are coming to see me and they want to work hard for 2 days. They don't want to spend like the morning doing what they've always done with each other and doing what they've already done in couples therapy. So
Right.
I will say sometimes, I don't think you need my help with this. I don't think you need my help with, being mad maybe in this moment. I want to validate your anger. I want to go towards it and meet you there. But I don't. I want to validate anger, numbness, these things in order to start creating connection to
Yeah.
go deeper.
You
I'm
know,
not going to spend a ton of time like organizing the anger, getting the history of the anger, talking. And the more anger is up in the room, the less safe it is for the heart that wants me to see it.
we've
So,
seen that reminds me of two things. One of the things that I learned from the trainer from Arkansas, Ryan Reyna. And
right.
Ryan he talked about working with drawers, how and he stood up and he gave a body description. He said it's almost like the world of withdrawers, like I'm just with the withdrawer in the therapy room and I'm kind of standing up and it's almost like I'm just walking over here and I'm looking at the wall and I might mention something I'm seeing. And then I'm looking over here and I see the water bottle and I'm just kind of gently meandering around inside this withdrawer, right? But just kind of gently doing it, right? And gently, and then like you were saying, and then finding where's some vulnerability, let's go there. But to me, that kind of speaks to how me as a general pursuer in life, it's easy for me to fall into that trap, Jim, of pushing too hard on the withdrawer. And then it's almost like I'm now pursuing the withdrawer. And the message I'm going to be giving the withdrawer is that they're not doing emotion enough, right?
What does pushing the withdrawer mean? What would that look like?
Well, it would be like this. It would be like in an enactment when I've asked a critical pursuer to talk about something vulnerable and they talk about how, yes, I get really angry at you, Bill. But underneath it, it's just that I want things to be better and I do love you, but I get so scared, but it's because I really want things to be better. Like that's a lovely thing that as a EFT therapist, we would want that to be shared, right? So we would have them share that. But then the withdrawer might just block it and just have a blank stare and be just like, like I even heard this once, I get that sounds good, but it to be honest, it feels like you're just saying that in front of the therapist. And I I'd like to buy it, but I don't really believe you're telling the truth. So just a real kind of boom, right? Well, sometimes I think before, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would, as the therapist, be having this emotional reaction of like, oh God, oh, I wish you, Mr. Withdrawer, couldn't you take it in? Couldn't you see the vulnerability? And then when he doesn't, and he kind of puts up the block, whether I say it or not, there's a part of me that's kind of siding with the pursuer, right? And I'm kind of like,
Um,
yeah, if you could just, get in touch with some emotion and realize that this woman really does love you. And then I might say something like, well, but couldn't you hear the softness in what, she said? And he might be like, no, not you know, and so to me, it just is like a, just
Yeah,
reminds.
so I wouldn't do that either. I like that. If that's pushing, I you know out in the EFT world, often people say things like, "Don't pursue the withdrawer." So I haven't know. For me, I'm seeking to be come from a secure place. I want to be a secure attachment figure while we're doing the work.
Right.
And I want to create safety. And in that place where I can channel my inner secure, my caretaking system also comes up. And I don't believe that withdrawers are actually blocking much of any enactment. They look like it,
Right.
but I think they have very porous armor. And so things are coming in. And the kind of description that you gave, one, she's being somewhat vulnerable, but she's just talking about a need. You know, I wish we could get along.
Right.
She's not turning in that example saying it's so lonely here and I can never find you. And I get so lonely that then sometimes I just get mad and all I can do is be mad. But really, I just miss you so much.
Yeah.
And there, you know, what's happening when your partner says that, I'm immediately wondering, are you feeling like a failure
Right.
because she's crying? Are you overwhelmed because it's stirring up in you, you know, male, female, he, they, she, whoever this partner is, right? We're talking a lot of in heterosexual terms, but right, my partner here, my family member or something that's turning to me and saying, I'm so sad, I'm so lonely, right? And it's so hard for me that I end up getting mad. Maybe you're stirring up emotion in me, and I've been emotionally avoiding these things for decades. So I don't know what to do with it. I presume there's flooding happening in the avoidant or withdrawn person.
Right.
I don't think they're blocking.
Right.
Now we could describe, you know, like a behavioral thing and say like that's a block or something.
Yeah.
You know, these kind of terms about like blocks and is it an, oh, you know, is there red light or yellow light, green, and all these things. It's not the world I inhabit.
Right.
The world I inhabit is what's happening in the present moment process right now, within and between. You know, Sue kept always said to me, you're looking at what's within and between, and what's between impacts what's within, and what's within is driving what's between.
Well, you see, yeah, you
So,
see, yeah. And I was gonna say the reason why that makes so much sense, Jim, sorry to interrupt,
no, fine.
is that, yeah, like if I had been the therapist and like that example I told you of the guy who it looks like a block, right? It looks like he's not taking it in, looks like he's not really connecting with his wife's more vulnerable emotions. What I have learned to do is just like what you said is inside of my head, I'm knowing that yes, this is penetrating, and it's like how being a human being, it couldn't not penetrate. I mean, and so even though the withdrawer may not be ready to talk about it or put words to it, the way I'm trying to, this is why we'll kind of lean in. And I use a lot of silence. I will just say something like, oh, that's really important. And let's just let that sit for a second. And I'll kind of count to 5. And and because I'm just assuming that there's some emotion and like you're saying, probably some flooding going on for the withdrawer. And then almost just moving forward, even when he might say, no, I don't believe it, right? Just taking that as like, oh, that's a huge, important statement. Like we can go there, we can go that when she says whatever she said, that what happens for you is a quick response of, you don't believe it. Like, how does it feel to even say that? How does it feel to say to this woman who just shared whatever she shared that you don't believe it? Like, what's that like?
Mhm. Where I might go is, if what would happen if you did believe it and it turned out not to be true? And I'm going to change my voice. I'm going to channel a little sadness. I'm going to say to a younger part of them, Jan, what would it be like to believe in what she just said, what Carla just said, and then it wasn't true?
Okay,
That's
so
what they're about. So
let's drop into that, because is that okay if we drop into this?
sure, sure, sure.
We
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah,
10
absolutely.
minutes. Let's go about 8 minutes of just that scenario. This is a different couple now. And let's
Let me
just,
do just a little bit of content to
yeah,
explain what I'm saying.
yeah,
So what I mean, I think it's useful for a lot of people to think about, like, there's blocks. They want to, what's they want, it's helpful to have a little structure. I had a partner take a risk, and was it received? Was it kind of a little in between? Was it like, and the other person got triggered, and I want a roadmap, for what do I do?
right,
Who do I attend to? And in stage one of this work, people are being triggered a lot. It can be very almost overwhelming to, like, who do I spend time on?
right.
But if we're talking about emotional withdrawal and emotional avoidance and things, for me, we did a number of times a workshop on working with emotional withdrawal. And one of the first things I did was I just stand up there with my back to the audience for a minute after I got introduced. I just stand with my back to them, like, here's withdrawal, isn't it? Then I would turn and I'd say, it's going to take a lot of love to change the way things are. It's going to take a lot of love before we get too far. So if you look in my direction and we don't see eye to eye, my heart needs protection, and so do I. And I would say to everybody in that room, I'd say, now lean in and listen. Call up every withdrawn part of you that avoids, that withdrawn, avoiding person in your life, the client that's troubling you, and know something that my withdrawers have taught me in my personal life and in my therapy, and my inner withdrawer taught me inside, that they're all whispering something very powerful and precious. If you listen carefully, it's so alone in here. Would someone please find me?
See, Jim, you just,
That's
yeah, see, I just had a full on body experience of what you just did, because I just imagine myself sitting in that audience, expecting, hoping to hear from an expert, excited, and then boom, he's standing there for a minute or two saying nothing with his back to me. And then you come forward, and I could just see it on your face as you sang that song and kind of leaned in. You may have said this to your audience. I mean, I visually saw emotion on your face and in your body. And I don't think you were just play acting. I think that you just now really felt that as you were saying those words and saying and getting to that point of saying, it's so alone in here. Could someone find me? Right. To me, that just hits me, Jim, of that's the place. I don't know how to say it, but like if I were in therapy and I were the client and you did that and you got that emotional and you connected with me like that, I would be dropping down into my emotion, because it would feel like I was being given permission by you to not just, you're not just being Jim the therapist, but it's almost like you're being Jim the human being. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. We're finding people. We can find people. They come to us, and we have an opportunity. And there's withdrawn parts of what we call, blamers and pursuers. There's hidden parts that, lonely is that part of us that longs and needs to be known, that's unknown. And some of these human beings, humans, that we say, oh, they're a withdrawer, they're a avoider, and we come up with different rules about how to, like, what I care about is finding them. What I care about is making it safe for them to show up in my office. What I care about is I've got you for some period of time. And I try all sorts of things. Silence is beautiful. I'll do sometimes it just that I'm talking and reflecting back what I'm hearing, and I'm making guesses, and the person's looking at me and nodding. And I think, wow, a lot of eye contact for somebody that's avoidant. Must be onto something. I'll fly fish, something I learned working with those teenagers from Dave and Willa at Denver Children's Home. They want to tell us diddly. So I wonder if Frank's upset because his PO, says, I wonder if he's upset because, and finally, I'm not upset about that. I'm upset at Mr. Walker. He's a jerk. Okay, we got something. I use music, I use poetry, I use images, I'll listen to their images. I look for and it's like, how do we that's a different level of emotional presence that we're wanting to have. It's like, I want to be more like Fred Rogers. I want to be able to say, of course you avoid. It makes sense to me. Of course you withdraw. Let's make space for your withdrawal.
Yeah.
Let's make space. Of course you protest. Of course you get so upset at the absence of your partner. Of course, I want to understand that. And I want to understand
the phrase that I use that goes with that is you've clearly got really good reasons why you do that. And I'll even say, and I think I understand some of them, but boy, I'm really curious about finding out more about, why it is that you withdraw, because I'm sure there are some really actually understandable things that contribute to you withdrawing.
And then the implied question I have that I'm coming towards is, and tell me about what it's like in there, in this place that avoids.
Yeah.
What's it like in this place that withdraws? What's it like to be a human that's trying to have a pain-free life? What's it like to try to live without sorrow? What's it like to be sitting in this room with this person that matters so much to you, that you came here as a parent to help your young person that's struggling with addiction? You came here as a partner, and you look all stoic and indifferent on the outside, but you're sitting in my office, and somebody else said you were a narcissist, and somebody else said you got this, and somebody else says maybe he's alexithymic or she's alexithymic, and maybe, and I just presume you're human. We're a species. We're an emotional species. And I want to co-create as much as possible and learn over time what allows people to come forward. And some of that is personal to Ed, to Shelley, to Leroy or Gonzalo, and people that are listening to this, that you'll have your ways of welcoming people that might not work for me or I could borrow from.
Yeah.
I have food and tea and stuff in my office, because food and warm drinks communicate across so many cultures that you're welcome here. I want you to be able to, yes, you can take your shoes off and put your feet on. I have a couch, not chairs. Because when people start getting intimate, the primate grooming behaviors and the hugging and the touching and the wiping, maybe you could let him or her or them wipe those tears instead of the Kleenex.
One thing that I want to share before I'm almost done, this is, I came up with this one, and I was sort of happy because it seems like most of my good EFT work I've learned from someone else, but this is one that just came to me. And it came to me about a month ago, and I've been doing it at least every 3 or 4 days. And it's when couples are starting to bond, and couples, they're holding hands. Maybe they walk in holding hands. The negative cycle is starting to thaw, and good things are happening. And I'll just kind of move toward, I call it like celebration sessions, and asking questions like, so tell me again, let's revisit. Why were you so attracted to her when you first married him? Or why, Bill, why were you so attracted to Dave? And then I'll say something like, and what's something in the last week that Dave has done, Bill, that has really made your heart sing? And kind of heightening joy, right? And connection. And I'll see them kind of leaning toward each other. And a question I'll ask is, say, Bill, like I asked you what it felt like to say what you just said. And I said, like, what would your body do? Like, what would you do if I wasn't here? We're feeling the way you're feeling. And a lot of times what I get is, well, I'd either be sitting on his lap or I'd be hugging him. And I said, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to shut the door of my office, and I'm going to give you guys 4 or 5 minutes, and don't feel any pressure. You can just sit and talk, but I just want you to let your bodies express whatever you want to express, especially kind of taking me out of it, because I want this to be your moment. And when I do that, it's been 100% so far that people have, I come back and I knock on the door and I look in and say, is it okay if I come back? And I come back and sit down. And usually they've been hugging, they've been kissing, they've been, and then we process that, and we process like, how did that happen? And it's been wonderful. I don't know if it's ICEFT approved interventions, right? But I tell you, man, it seems to has heightened some connection.
Yeah, it's got a sort of a kind of a respect for an understanding that you might touch, look at each other, you might want to physically be a little more intimate and stuff. And you might be embarrassed to do that in front of me. I do something similar. I did this on Monday, Tuesday. It's what we're talking about, and this couple let me record them and give me permission to use it in training. So I can talk about them a little more detail. But the emotional withdrawer partner came in very surfacey, and by an hour in, it dropped into some really deep emotion, and then we found some really deep shame, and then some childhood stuff, and extensively came for affair recovery work, and we went towards that in the afternoon. They came back from lunch, and he looks at me and he says, you've got something you're doing here, this empathic, like this, you just kept going, and it just kept inviting my emotion, my heart. And I just, wow, like he couldn't even quite have
And
words for it, right?
and this was the avoidant, this was the withdrawal.
Yeah, this is the avoidant, and this is 4 hours in, and because I'm just so invested and interested in, I want to find the lonely parts of you and where you're hidden. Because until we find that, you're not going to be able to be there for her in her distress about the affair. And so with them, I did something similar. They started by the end of day one, and then several times in day two, they were just in such limerence with each other that after about a minute or so of that limerence, I just quietly get up and leave for like 5 minutes and let them talk, And it's also a message of, you've got this. I think that's,
Well,
but it's interesting. Just the words are important. So the last thought, as we pause,
yeah.
you said when they start to bond, when their bond is shifting, they're able to reach for each other in a more vulnerable way. They're having more empathic resonance. So the one thing that I think is the most important is to believe in the bond.
Mm.
And when you get lost in whether or not there's a bond here, I think we lose a lot of our attachment, emotion, and our EFT mojo.
Oh, right. Because of course, even if they're deeply in stage one and they're very reactive and they're fighting, there of course is still bond. It's just that
Yes, it's
that
insecure.
that bond, it's insecure, and it's but that's a great way to look at it. That's a way I think that can also help us to have more hope as therapists, is that we can just know. I mean, it's like I always tell people, even after those sessions in my office that feel terrible, feel like they walk out and they seem like they're more upset than when they walk in. We've all had those. My supervisor would always say, well, unconsciously, you never know what's going on. And the fact that they were there and they showed up, and maybe they fought and they just did all of that, you have no way of knowing it. And it's even not any of your business, because you just need to know that you're doing the best you can. And there's 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 a lot more going on than we can wrap our cognitive minds
Yeah,
around.
maybe. And you learned a lot about what it's like to be caught in that negative cycle. You learned a lot. You got to see it and be in it and be like, oh my gosh, I got frozen in the face of it, or I got anxious in the face of it, or I didn't know what to do in the face of that. And I wasn't in it. It's humbling, right? I wasn't in that damn negative cycle. And I couldn't, like, these are moments over and over again that I've been in, that I'm then trying, what allowed me to slow things down? What allowed me to I had a series where I was working with a lot of people in the railroad industry, and this fellow says to me, it's like 22 years ago or something, and he says, you know, if you try to stop a big long coal train and it's only going 5 miles an hour, it'll stop in about a football field, 300 feet. If that train gets up to 60 miles an hour, I don't know if I have the exact ratio right, but I'm close. He says it's going to take over half a mile to stop. And he looks at me, he goes, and I think, young man, you let us get up to 60 miles an hour and then you got to work your butt off to slow us down. I would suggest you interrupt us at 5 miles an hour and ask us what's going on.
That's what he said.
He told me this. Yeah. He says, I would suggest
what
you stop us at 5 miles. And I said, how come? Why? And he says, it's miserable to get to 60 miles an hour with this person I love so much. We need your help,
wow,
not your observation.
what a golden nugget that was.
Yeah, it was humbling, but I was like, okay. And the next time they started to speed up, I said, oh, I think we're at 5 miles an hour, and we all work together. And yeah. All right. Well, I robbed you of a role play. Sorry. Maybe we'll do this again on some other subject. We'll figure out a role play.
This was wonderful. And I just am sure, I know that I took a lot out of this. I mean, I'm still buzzing in the enjoyment of this, and I'm sure that our listeners picked up a lot. So I would love to do this again, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thanks for what you're doing. We all need resources out there, right? It's an attachment-based work. It's emotionally focused, and it believes in humans as social beings. So trying to do vulnerable therapies like emotionally focused therapy on your own, don't do it.
Right.
We need videos, we need workshops, we need colleagues, we need community. I'm not in the room alone.
Right.
I have Sue Johnson in my office all the time.
Well, now now you're you already were taking up a little space inside of my heart and mind, and now you just your Jim Thomas just grew a little bit in my mind and my heart. So
namaste. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, take care.